Imagine paying a bill every single month for something that was already solved, not made cheaper, not subsidized, but free, pulled from the earth itself, transmitted without a single wire, available to every human being on the planet simultaneously. A man figured this out. He demonstrated it. He proved it. The physics worked. Then one family decided that free energy was the single greatest threat to their fortune that had ever existed. Within a decade, that man was broke. His laboratory was in ashes, and the system built in place of his vision had a meter on it. That meter has been running ever since. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a business history. The names are real. The documents are real. The money is real. And by the time you finish reading this, you'll understand exactly how the American electrical grid was not built to serve you. It was built to bill you. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what existed before it was taken. In the 1880s, electricity was not a utility. It was a wonder. Thomas Edison's Pearl Street Station in Lower Manhattan, the first central power station in America, opened in September 1882. It served 59 customers. It covered 1 square mile. And to receive power from it, you needed to be physically connected by copper wire buried under the street. Edison's model was, in every meaningful sense, a gas lamp company with better fuel. You burned it. You measured it. You got billed. The meter was built into the concept from day one. Edison was a brilliant inventor. He was also a businessman with investors to satisfy and a revenue model to protect. Across the Atlantic, a young Serbian physicist named Nikola Tesla was looking at the same problem from a completely different angle. Tesla was not thinking about how to sell electricity. He was thinking about what electricity actually was. Tesla had already developed alternating current, AC power, the system that runs the entire modern world. He developed it while working for Edison, who rejected it completely. Edison had already built his entire business around direct current. He wasn't going to let science get in the way of his revenue model. The conflict between them became known as the War of Currents. It is one of the most consequential business disputes in American history. Tesla left Edison's employment and found a backer in George Westinghouse, a Pittsburgh industrialist who understood that AC could transmit power over distances that DC never could. The Westinghouse-Tesla partnership won the contract to electrify the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Over 100,000 light bulbs. The public was transfixed. The following year, they built the first major hydroelectric power station at Niagara Falls, transmitting electricity 26 miles to the city of Buffalo. AC power won the War of Currents. Edison's model was commercially dead within a decade. But Tesla was not finished. In 1899, Tesla moved to Colorado Springs and built a laboratory unlike anything that had existed before. The artificial lightning he generated there could be seen from 10 miles away and heard from twice that distance. What Tesla was trying to do, at Colorado Springs and later at Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island, was transmit electrical energy wirelessly through the Earth itself. His theory held that the Earth functioned as a giant conductor. If you could excite it at the right resonant frequency, you could pull energy from it at any point on the planet's surface with a properly tuned receiver. The implications were staggering. Every human being on Earth could access electrical power with nothing more than a receiving device. No power lines. No central stations. No billing infrastructure. No meter. Not free as in government subsidized. Tesla had already developed alternating current, AC power, the system that runs the entire modern world. He developed it while working for Edison, who rejected it completely. Edison had already built his entire business around direct current. He wasn't going to let science get in the way of his revenue model. The conflict between them became known as the War of Currents. It is one of the most consequential business disputes in American history. Tesla left Edison's employment and found a backer in George Westinghouse, a Pittsburgh industrialist who understood that AC could transmit power over distances that DC never could. The Westinghouse-Tesla partnership won the contract to electrify the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Over 100,000 light bulbs. The public was transfixed. The following year, they built the first major hydroelectric power station at Niagara Falls, transmitting electricity 26 miles to the city of Buffalo. AC power won the War of Currents. Edison's model was commercially dead within a decade. But Tesla was not finished. In 1899, Tesla moved to Colorado Springs and built a laboratory unlike anything that had existed before. The artificial lightning he generated there could be seen from 10 miles away and heard from twice that distance. What Tesla was trying to do, at Colorado Springs and later at Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island, was transmit electrical energy wirelessly through the Earth itself. His theory held that the Earth functioned as a giant conductor. If you could excite it at the right resonant frequency, you could pull energy from it at any point on the planet's surface with a properly tuned receiver. The implications were staggering. Every human being on Earth could access electrical power with nothing more than a receiving device. No power lines, no central stations, no billing infrastructure, no meter. Not free as in government subsidized. Free as in the energy already exists in the Earth and atmosphere, and the only thing you need is the knowledge of how to access it. Tesla found his patron for Wardenclyffe in J.P. Morgan, the most powerful financier in American history. Morgan had already consolidated steel, railroads, and banking. He agreed to fund the Long Island project for $150,000, an enormous sum in 1901. But Morgan made a critical assumption when he wrote that check. He assumed Tesla was building a wireless telegraph system, a competitor to Marconi's radio. That was a business model Morgan understood. You control the infrastructure, you charge for the transmission, you collect the fee. What Tesla was actually building was something else entirely. And when Morgan figured that out, the project died. The official story is that Morgan pulled Tesla's funding because Marconi beat him to the first transatlantic radio transmission in December 1901, making Tesla's wireless ambitions commercially redundant. That story is technically accurate. It is also functionally incomplete. By 1901, Morgan had organized the formation of General Electric, combining Edison's electrical companies with the Thomson-Houston Electric Company, specifically to dominate the American electrical industry. The business chain worked like this. Morgan's banks financed the construction of power plants. Those power plants purchased turbines, generators, and switchgear from General Electric, in which Morgan held financial interests. The power plants then sold electricity through a metered billing system, generating perpetual revenue streams that secured the loans Morgan's banks had issued in the first place. It was a closed loop of extraction. Morgan financed construction. Morgan's industrial interests supplied the equipment. Morgan's financial network collected the returns from a billing system that never stopped running. Free electricity didn't just threaten one part of this chain. If electricity was freely available from the Earth itself, you didn't need a power plant. You didn't need Morgan's financing. You didn't need General Electric's equipment. You didn't need a utility company. And you absolutely did not need a meter. In a now famous exchange, Morgan reportedly asked Tesla directly, "If the system works, where do I put the meter?" Tesla had no good answer. Because there was no good answer. That was the entire point. Without a meter, there was no revenue. Without revenue, there was no return on investment. Without a return on investment, J.P. Morgan was not interested. Morgan withdrew his funding in 1903. Without capital, Wardenclyffe sat unfinished. In 1917, the tower was demolished and sold for scrap to pay Tesla's debts. Nikola Tesla died in a New York hotel room in January 1943, alone, nearly penniless, with approximately $3,000 to his name. The man who invented the system that powers the modern world ended his life without enough money to keep the lights on in his own room. While Tesla's dream collapsed, the electrical infrastructure of America was being constructed on an entirely different set of principles. The period from roughly 1895 to 1920 was the era of utility consolidation. Dozens of independent local electrical companies were being absorbed, merged, and folded into larger holding companies. The driving force was not efficiency. It was not better service. It was control. A holding company doesn't generate or distribute power. It owns the stock of the companies that do. And because regulators oversaw the operating companies, not the financial structures sitting above them, holding companies could engage in extraordinary financial manipulation completely legally. Samuel Insull was the man who embodied this era most completely. He had started as Edison's personal secretary. He rose to head Commonwealth Edison in Chicago. Then, through the 1910s and 1920s, he constructed a pyramid of holding companies that ultimately controlled utilities serving 5,000 communities across 32 states. At its peak, the Insull empire represented $2.7 billion in assets. controlling power for 1 in 8 Americans. The pyramid was designed to extract. Holding companies charged the operating utilities for management services, financing, equipment procurement, every conceivable function. These charges flowed upward through the structure, generating profit regardless of how efficiently the actual utilities operated. The consumers paid for all of it. Because the regulatory commissions that were supposed to set fair rates had no visibility into the holding company structures above the companies they actually oversaw. And you could not choose a different provider. You could not opt out. You paid the rate that was set, and the rate was set by a commission frequently populated by former utility executives, which regularly approved rates that guaranteed the utilities a comfortable return on their investment. The grid was not built to serve you. The grid was built to be the infrastructure through which you would be permanently billed. In 1929, the stock market crashed, and the holding company pyramid schemes began to unravel. Insull's empire was the most spectacular casualty. In April 1932, Middle West Utilities declared bankruptcy. The entire edifice collapsed within months. More than 600,000 investors lost money. Pension funds evaporated. Estimated losses reached $750 million. Insull fled to Europe. He was extradited from Turkey, tried on multiple counts of fraud, and acquitted, largely because the specific mechanisms of holding company extraction were not technically illegal under existing law. He died in 1938 in a Paris subway station with $20 in his pocket. The collapse became the political justification for the Public Utility Holding Company Act of 1935, one of the landmark New Deal reforms, which broke up holding company pyramids and reorganized the industry around regulated monopolies. This is often told as the story of government stepping in to protect consumers. There is truth in that telling. But there is another side. The regulated monopoly structure that emerged from the 1935 Act was itself a guarantee to the surviving utility companies. In exchange for accepting rate regulation, they received permanent, legally protected monopoly service territories, guaranteed returns on investment, and a rate-setting process that allowed them to recover all costs plus a defined profit margin from captive ratepayers. The regulation did not end extraction. It institutionalized it, made it orderly, put a bureaucratic process around it, and called that process protection. When Tesla filed his patents between 1897 and 1902, he described what modern engineers now call Earth resonance transmission, using the Earth ionosphere cavity as a carrier medium for electromagnetic energy. The Schumann resonance, formally identified by German physicist Winfried Otto Schumann in 1952, 9 years after Tesla's death, confirmed that the Earth and its ionosphere do indeed form a resonant cavity capable of propagating electromagnetic waves around the planet. Tesla had intuited this principle from his Colorado Springs experiments more than half a century before Schumann described it mathematically. Whether Wardenclyffe, if completed, would have worked exactly as Tesla claimed, that remains genuinely contested among physicists and engineers. The efficiency losses over distance, the challenge of selective tuning, the scale of required receiver infrastructure, these are real engineering questions. But what is not contested is this. The decision to stop was made on financial grounds, not scientific ones. Wardenclyffe was not abandoned because Tesla's physics was proven wrong. It was abandoned because there was no revenue model attached to it. The physics was never fully tested at scale. The experiment was terminated before the results were in. And that choice was made by people who were already making extraordinary amounts of money from the alternative. The average American household today pays approximately $1,500 per year for electricity. Multiplied across 130 million households, the residential electricity market alone generates roughly $195 billion in annual revenue. Add commercial and industrial customers, and the total American electricity market exceeds $450 billion per year. That money flows through a system whose fundamental architecture was designed in the 1880s, whose monopoly protection was institutionalized in the 1930s, and whose relationship to consumers has changed less than almost any other major industry in the past century. You cannot negotiate with your utility. You cannot choose a competitor. You cannot opt out. Today, the utility industry consolidation of the past 3 decades has produced a smaller number of far larger holding companies. NextEra Energy, Duke Energy, Dominion Energy, Southern Company, American Electric Power, and the three largest institutional shareholders of virtually every major American utility? Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. These three asset management firms hold dominant positions in essentially every large utility in the country. They also hold dominant positions in the equipment manufacturers that supply those utilities, the fuel companies that supply those manufacturers, and the financial institutions that lend to all of them. The circularity of interest that characterized J.P. Morgan's relationship to the early electrical industry has not disappeared. It has become more abstract, more diffuse, and more legally sanitized. But the underlying structure remains essentially intact. This is not a conspiracy. It does not require secret meetings or explicit coordination. It is simply the natural result of capital concentration in a system designed around permanent captive revenue. When the same pools of capital own everything in a closed loop, those pools are served by the continuation of the closed loop, regardless of what alternatives might theoretically exist. Tesla's system would have broken the loop. That was its fundamental characteristic. Wireless power from the Earth itself has no fuel cost, no transmission infrastructure cost, no billing cost. The only cost is the initial construction of receiver infrastructure, and once built, it serves its users indefinitely, without ongoing payment. This is not merely inconvenient for the existing system. It is existentially incompatible with it. Solar power and battery storage are the first technologies in American history that have genuinely threatened to break the captive utility model. A solar installation on your roof generates power from sunlight, which is genuinely free, and stores it in batteries for use when the sun isn't shining. If properly sized, you can achieve genuine energy independence. The utility industry has fought this at every level. In Florida, a utility company spent millions funding a deceptive ballot initiative that posed as a pro-solar measure while actually limiting solar access. The deception was eventually exposed. The original initiative was defeated anyway. Across the country, utilities have successfully lobbied to reduce or eliminate net metering, the system that allows solar homeowners to sell excess power back to the grid at rates that make installation economically viable. When those rates are cut, the payback period extends dramatically, pricing most households out of the equation. The argument utilities make is that solar customers are free riding on grid infrastructure maintained by non-solar customers. There is a sliver of validity to this argument. There is a much larger amount of financial self-interest behind it. Tesla is the most famous case. He is not the only one. Edwin Howard Armstrong invented FM radio, technically superior to AM in almost every way. He spent years fighting RCA in a patent dispute that eventually broke him financially. He died by suicide in 1954. RCA paid a settlement to his widow worth a fraction of what his patents were actually worth. AM radio was suppressed for decades because its replacement would have made RCA's existing infrastructure investment commercially obsolete. Each individual story, examined in isolation, has a plausible conventional explanation. This one was a fraud. That one's physics was wrong. The other one died of natural causes. Examined together, across more than a century, they describe something else. They describe a system that is structurally hostile to any technology that would render the existing billing infrastructure obsolete. Not because of a conspiracy, but because existing infrastructure carries enormous financial and political power, and financial and political power is naturally deployed in the defense of itself. This is not unique to energy. Pharmaceutical companies resisted cheap generics. Telecom incumbents fought municipal broadband. Automotive incumbents fought the right to sell electric vehicles directly to consumers. The pattern is the same. The mechanisms vary. The logic is constant. In energy, the stakes are simply higher, because energy is not a consumer preference. It is not a luxury. It is the foundation of every other form of productive activity. Whoever controls energy controls, at a fundamental level, the cost of everything else. Here is what is not in dispute. Nikola Tesla spent the final years of the 19th century and the first years of the 20th century developing a system for wireless power transmission that, by his account and by his experimental results, would have made electrical energy freely available to every human being on Earth. He was not a fraud. He was not a crank. He was the inventor whose fundamental patents underlie every alternating current electrical system on the planet. His funding was withdrawn by the most powerful financier in American history at the precise moment it became clear that the technology could not be monetized through a conventional billing model. In the decades that followed, the American electrical grid was built not as public infrastructure, but as a privately owned, legally protected, regulatory-captured system for the generation of guaranteed returns from captive consumers who had no ability to choose alternatives. The Wardenclyffe Tower came down in 1917 not because free electricity was physically impossible, but because free electricity was economically inconvenient for the people already making money from metered electricity. The experiment was stopped before the results were in. That was a choice, and it was made by people with every financial reason to make it. The meter J.P. Morgan put on electricity is still running. It has been running for more than 140 years. And the bill it generates, month after month, household after household, flows back through a system designed in the 1880s by people who understood one thing very clearly. Free energy is not a scientific problem. It is an economic threat. And economic threats are not solved with physics. They are solved with lawyers, lobbyists, purchased legislatures, and the patient, ruthless application of financial power to the defense of financial interest. The lights are on. The meter is running. And somewhere in the archives of a demolished tower on Long Island, the ghost of a different world is still waiting to be built.